Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an analysis of a modern political strategy. It's one that tries to solve a big electoral puzzle by changing the optics, how things look, rather than the substance of what they are. So let's get right into it. What's behind this struggle? Well, according to political commentator Victor Davis Hanson, the answer isn't really about changing policies. It's about changing perceptions through, a pretty fascinating kind of political presentation. He basically argues that instead of fundamentally changing what they believe, the Democratic Party is trying to change how their candidates look and feel to voters. The strategy? Adopting what he calls a working man persona. It's like a costume change. To really get this strategy, we first have to rewind a little and look at the problem it was designed to solve, at least according to Hanson's take on it. Hanson claims that this group, which was once a super reliable base for the Democratic Party, has been steadily drifting away. So in response, he says, party strategists did a kind of political autopsy to figure out, okay, what exactly went wrong here? And the diagnosis, according to this analysis, points to two main issues. First, a bunch of unpopular policies, and second, a history of what were seen as insults coming from party leaders. Hanson points to a set of key policy positions where he claims the party found itself on the 30% side of public opinion. That put them at odds with a huge majority of voters on some really hot-button issues. But it wasn't just about policy. He argues there was also a pattern of language that alienated these voters, and he says it started with this term used by Barack Obama to describe some voters in small towns. This perceived pattern, Hanson says, just kept going. He points to Hillary Clinton's now famous description of some opposition voters during that really intense 2016 presidential campaign. And Hanson also highlights that Joe Biden used language that voters could definitely see as insulting, at one point apparently calling them dregs and chumps. Okay, so you're losing a demographic over both policy and tone. What's the solution? Hanson argues it wasn't to change the policies. It was to just apply a superficial layer, a new coat of paint, a veneer. And this is really the heart of it. The goal isn't to change the message, but to change the messenger's appearance. The idea is to keep the ideology, but hide it behind a more relatable blue-collar facade. Now, this slide just visualizes the concept perfectly. Hanson uses Pete Buttigieg as a prime example of this whole transformation idea, from, a multilingual, academic figure to a more rugged persona with a beard, a flannel shirt, and a tractor cap. And the analysis doesn't stop there. It actually provides several other examples of what it calls case studies in this rebranding strategy, where candidates are allegedly camouflaged to appeal to a very specific voter profile. First up, Hanson points to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. He suggests that Walz's whole everyman persona, talking about hunting and pickup trucks, was a deliberately constructed but ultimately unconvincing political act. Then there's the case of a Texas candidate Hanson refers to as Mr. Tirico. Here, the claim is that an elite background was intentionally hidden behind the facade of a religious leader to appeal to the state's more conservative electorate. But, and this is a big but, Hanson points out that the candidate's public statements and social media history revealed a totally different picture, one that he claims was much more aligned with a radical ideology than a traditional evangelical viewpoint. And finally, Hanson focuses on Graham Plattner up in Maine. He presents him as another elite candidate who was allegedly repackaged, this time as a hardworking, salt-of-the-earth oyster man. But again, Hanson argues this facade just cracked under a little bit of scrutiny. He points to a prestigious prep school background, a social media post where the candidate allegedly called rural Americans stupid, and a highly controversial tattoo. All of this brings us right to the core of Hanson's argument, his claim that this entire strategy is built on a really shaky foundation. Because, you just can't fake authenticity. So, the big question is, does it work? Well, according to Hanson, the answer is a definitive no. He argues that it fails because the underlying sentiment of condescension is still there, and voters can sense that it's just not real. And he provides these recent examples from media personalities as evidence that a perceived disdain for the working class just keeps surfacing, which completely undermines any attempt to build that blue-collar image. Hanson then contrasts this whole veneer approach with the appeal of Donald Trump. He argues that working-class voters responded to Trump not because he looked like them, he's a billionaire, but because his message acknowledged their economic realities and spoke directly to their concerns without talking down to them. So, ultimately, the analysis we've walked through leaves us with this central question about political authenticity. In an age of sophisticated marketing, can a carefully crafted facade ever really replace a solid foundation of shared values and a genuine connection? That's the puzzle at the heart of this entire political debate.